Terrificon is back. The Terrific Comic-Con, devoted to, what else? Comic books and their creators, returns to Mohegan Sun Expo Center in Connecticut. The 3-day event features the largest gathering of comic book writers and artists. The largest of its kind in New England is on August 9th through the 11th. Terrificon producer Mitch Halleck promises this year's event will be the best con he's ever produced, with today's top talent, like Tom King, Donny Cates, Ryan Stegman, Clay Mann, Liam Sharp, Derek Robertson, plus legendary creators Jim Steranko, Chris Claremont, Jim Starlin, Jerry Ordway, and in his final con appearance, the one and only George Perez. Terrificon will be celebrating Batman's anniversary, as well as featuring actors from the Bat films, Billy D. Williams, Robert Wool, and Val Kilmer. Plus, Doctor Who's John Barrowman, The Flash's John Wesley Shipp, the voice cast reunion of Animaniacs, and Pinky and the Brain, and lots more. See for yourself why Terrificon is summer's hottest Comic-Con. This August 9th through the 11th, only at Mohegan Sun. For more information and guest list, visit Terrificon.com. It's terrific! Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. Man, it's been forever since we've had a Rucka debrief, hasn't it? And as Greg and I say, we usually try to arrange these things, and it takes about 3 months for our schedules to sync up. But always worth the wait. Talked to Greg last Friday. We had a great conversation. You know, half the time for me, Word Balloon is very social, and it's my chance to catch up with a lot of writers and artists that I've gotten to know over these 14 years. And it does become kind of, all right, it's hangout time. You know, we're at different parts of the country, but thank God for Skype and the various ways we can connect. And I can have a nice evening like I did on Friday talking to Greg. Greg has a lot of things going on right now, one of which I didn't even realize. The Old Guard is a Netflix movie that is in motion. It is being filmed now. Charlize Theron is in it. He talks about it. It's going to be made by Netflix. It is being made by Netflix, and it'll be out either late this year or early next year. Crazy. But we talked about the mid-budget movie and where it fits in today's entertainment platforms. And it's kind of something we started talking about with Rob Burnett and a few others, in how the movie theater experience has changed. And really, it's the spectacle, you know, for 90% of the output of films. I mean, we got little films, and we've got films that still make it to the Oscars, but whatever happened to that medium-budget film? And a lot of them now are being made by Netflix, and this is going to be interesting to see how they handle The Old Guard. He also has Stumptown at ABC. It's going to be on Wednesdays, 10 o'clock Eastern and Pacific, 9 o'clock for the middle of the country, where I'm at. I'm sure you've seen the 3-minute teaser that's on YouTube. If you haven't, check it out. Colby Smolder's very funny, good action. It seems like it's that kind of comedy action procedural that we hope for in a lot of the best detective shows of my youth and Greg's youth. We talk about some of those because you can't help but compare Stumptown to some of the greats, because I know that's what Greg was thinking about, that classic genre of detective fiction that came out of TV and suddenly becomes a different ballgame with a character like Dex. And I'm really looking forward to Stumptown. And then, of course, Amazon is still developing Lazarus. Lazarus is an excellent series. I love it. Greg and Mike Lark, they're kicking ass with that, and in fact are in the midst of their current story arc. First issue was in March, next issue is in July, and third one is in, I think, September. But they are 64-page one-shots that all connect, and of course connect to the bigger story. No, I'm really excited. Plus, Lois Lane, are you kidding me? Great stuff, man. Mike Perkins and Greg are finally... DC is wised up and are like, you know, we do need a Lois Lane book right now. And I'm glad that Brian Bendis has got a collaborator in Greg to handle Lois's story. It started in Leviathan Rising. We got a taste of what we're going to get in the Lois Lane comic that starts in July. But I'm very, very excited, and you know I'll be talking to Perkins about that if he's got the time, because I'm thrilled. I mean, this is something I've been asking for years, and as I say in the conversation, the only two people I could think of to do a great Lois Lane book, and actually shame on me, because let me add a third name. I think you'd either get Gail Simone, Phil Jimenez, or Greg Rucka to write a great Lois Lane book. And they got Greg. And Greg, you know, I mean, Greg writes great women. He does. He always has. From Queen and Country to, his run on Wonder Woman. Always just strong women in his books and everything. It always has been that way, and comics and his novels. So Whiteout, of course. This is good timing for Greg, and I really am happy for his success, not only in the comics, but now Hollywood finally wising up to the Greg Rucka work. And maybe we're going to get some good TV and film out of this new collaboration. Greg Rucka for a Rucka Debrief on today's Word Balloon. It's all brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you, League, for your support via Patreon. It's always a pleasure, and I truly appreciate your help. This year's been a weird year, starting off with the infection that I got at the end of last year. I'm still healing. I know, it's taken forever, but I am ahead of schedule. I mean, really, they were like, yeah, you're really not going to be fully healed until about a year. And they're telling me I'll be able to go to Terrificon in Connecticut in August, so that's great, and I'm psyched for that. And slowly letting me walk a little bit more and put a little more weight on the leg and everything, but it's healing and everything's going great. And really, the League of Word Balloonists has been instrumental in keeping the lights on here at wordballoon.com. So if you like Word Balloon, it's free. It'll always be free. But if you enjoy what I do and want to help out the cause, you can help me out by becoming a subscriber at Patreon. Is Word Balloon worth $1 a month to you? Is it worth $3 a month? The price of a comic book. I try to provide good conversation every month, and certainly with more downtime, I'm bringing you more episodes of Word Balloon and putting it all back into the podcast, man. I hope you're enjoying it. So if you want to subscribe, you can go to patreon.com/wordballoon or go to wordballoon.com and click on the Patreon ad, and that portal will take you to the Patreon page. But thank you for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. This episode of Word Balloon is also brought to you by Aftershock Comics. They are calling 2019 the year of reading dangerously. They're backing it up with some really great books. Killer Groove just dropped a couple weeks ago from Ollie Masters and Owen Marin. We had a great conversation about that LA crime book. Earlier in May, Descendant by Stephanie Phillips dropped. Another really interesting book and another great Word Balloon conversation. That's the tip of the iceberg, man. We're talking about the company that brings you Animosity every month from Marguerite Bennett, and A Walk Through Hell from Garth Ennis, and Dark Ark from Cullen Bunn, Baby Teeth from Donnie Cates, Stronghold from Phil Hester and Ryan Kelly, Oberon from Ryan Parrott, Dark Red from Tim Seeley. All great titles, interesting genres from the top writers and artists, and some of the brightest new stars in the creative community. In the weeks ahead, we'll be talking to more creators about their Aftershock books and more, but you don't have to wait. Check out full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on these books to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. All right, without further ado, let's get into our Rucka Debrief. Greg Rucka is back on Word Balloon. All right, we're in the private Q&A room, and it's time for another Rucka Debrief. And, man, there's a lot to talk about, Greg Rucka. I'm glad to have you back.
I always imagine that people envision an interrogation room with the one-way, mirror. The two-way mirror.
The reel-to-reel slowly moving as it's recording.
Yeah, exactly. And the overflowing ashtrays and the paper cups of really bad coffee and
fluorescent.
A lot of smelly middle-aged white guys in rumpled suits.
I fit the
nobody of color, and certainly no women. Really bad film grain. We do it like late 70s BBC, switched from video to film all of a sudden.
Or Police Story, Universal.
Yeah, well, and whatever you do, don't lean on a wall; it'll fall over. Cardboard set. But.
I was kind of thinking of Life on Mars when they do the Q&As and everything. Oh,
yeah,
good stuff.
Be aware that I'm sitting out in the backyard with the dog, so she may go off. So
we don't mind.
You may hear Marlo's commentary.
No, that's cool. Well, welcome back, man, and I'm sorry it's been so long. I always say
it has been a while, but
yeah.
But I always feel like, I mean, the thing is, it takes you and me 3 to 6 months to set one of these up. Because you'll email me, and I'll be like, yeah, I'd love to talk, but this week is horrible, and if we wait next week, this thing will come out, and then something comes up, and then I have been in deadline hell for the last 2 weeks, so you're actually my break.
Oh, that's nice. Well, thank you. Absolutely, man.
Hey, I get to talk to John. Then I'll get back to work.
This is my Friday night entertainment as well, and so thank you, buddy. It's always a pleasure, because we don't get to see each other face to face, so this is nice.
No, we really don't, and I'm not doing a lot of shows these days, so
yeah.
as that stands. I mean, it looks like I'm going to be at San Diego for a day or two this year.
I kind of figured. Yeah.
Well, this only came up in the last couple of days, actually.
Okay.
but Stumptown, the ABC reached out and was like, "We're going to do a thing Thursday," and they gave me the time, and they're like, "We'd like you to be there." To which I was like, "Well, you're more than welcome to get me there if you do that, and then I'll be more than happy to sing and dance." But
sure.
It is such a headache doing that show these days.
I know.
I haven't done it. I really think there was I had a streak there where I had gone like every year for, I want to say, it felt like 10, 15 years. And then, it was sort of like breaking an addiction. It's amazing the amount of work you can get done that week if you don't go to the show.
You see, that's smart. I still, when I don't go, as I always like to say, feel like I'm a kid with a broken leg watching from my window as everyone's playing on the street and having an awesome time. And it's like, oh, man.
I totally get that. That was actually how I felt the first, 2 years. I would be, constantly refreshing Twitter going, what did I miss? What did I miss?
Exactly.
And then I hit a point where I was like, I actually don't miss anything. There is nothing I am missing. The bad news will reach you.
That's
and eventually you'll hear it one way or another. So.
Oh, absolutely. Oh no, you are right. I haven't gone. I won't be going this year. I didn't go last year, so 17 was my most recent one. And yeah, it's as I always say, it's really expensive summer camp.
Yes, it is,
because it's beautiful out, and it's like, hey, all of our friends are here. But
let's make a tentative plan to meet up in 20 at some point.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely, man. No, I really do. Well, to be honest, I really would like to make a Portland trip, and I was kind of hoping to do that this year until health things kind of sidelined half the year for me. So just but it's okay.
Rose City's in the fall, so,
right.
You might want to consider it.
I don't know if I can go this year, but I might shoot for next year to Rose City, and regardless, just planning some sort of Portland trip because. I want to see all you guys and women. Yeah, I
mean, this town is lousy with comics, so.
Well, yeah,
you could certainly write it off as a business expense and do a round table or two.
That's kind of what I figured, man. Spend a day at Periscope, hang out with you, hang out with Kelly Sue and Matt and Brian and Parker. I mean, Colleen and Paul.
Yep.
So yeah.
As I said,
Wagner,
lousy with comics.
This is true. So. Absolutely, man. But that's all right. So, first of all, let's talk about, because you'll be, for all this stuff, you're going to be the one talking the most, but tell me about Old Guard. I had no idea that this was up and running as a production, and you've written the screenplay. That's wonderful.
Yeah, they're filming right now, and in point of fact, I'll go out at the end of next week, for the contractually obligated set visit, so it's very exciting. But it is now underway. I think they just ended the third week of filming, and they'll be filming, I think, through June, and I believe they've got a hard out by mid-July, so it should be wrapped by then. And I mean, you can look it up on IMDb, and you can see, Charlize is playing Andy. Charlize Theron is playing Andy. Kiki Lane is playing Niall. What is it? I always get his last name wrong. I want to say Marwan Kanzari is playing Joe. Let's see who else.
Yeah, I'm looking here.
I got to check here. I don't remember I don't remember their last names is the problem. Actor named Matthias Schoenaerts is going to be playing Booker. And Luca, I think it's Marinelli, is an Italian actor, is playing Nikki. So apparently, it's being directed by Gina Prince Bythewood, and I met Gina over a year ago. I wrote the screenplay for Skydance. And they were terrific. And I think that they part of the deal was I do the draft, and they were kind of like, we really want to do this property, so we will agree to your terms, sir.
Oh, that's great.
Well, right, but it's also Hollywood, right? Because 90% of the time they're like, he'll do the draft, and then we'll fire him because that's Hollywood.
Right.
and I think they were pleasantly surprised that it turns out, hey, this doesn't suck. So, we went from that to, we developed that, and I think it was, I want to say late last year. No, what? I can't remember. The dates get confused for me. But we finished the screenplay up, and then went out to a couple of directors, and Gina really responded to it, like really, really responded to it, to such an extent that when I went down and had the meeting with her, we're in this conference room at Skydance, and sort of the executives I'm dealing with are like, okay, and we're going to introduce you, and then we're going to leave you two alone, basically to see, are they going to get along?
Sure.
And Gina had gone out on her own. She'd picked up the graphic novel, and immediately all of her questions were like, well, this was in the graphic novel. Why wasn't it in the script?
Ooh.
Why did you change this? Why did you change this? So, and she was ferocious about trying to really maintain and preserve stuff.
Wow.
And then, it's interesting because in the comic, especially in the first series, Leo's drawing the second series right now. But in the first series, I went to extraordinary lengths not to justify why they were the way they were, or why they could do what they could do, and felt pretty strongly that it was actually irrelevant to the story. It's sort of like asking. It's sort of like any time travel movie that attempts to explain time travel. Because eventually you hit a point and you go like, wait a minute, that doesn't work. Like, if you know the physics, you're like, that doesn't work. It doesn't work. You get down a rabbit hole that eventually gives you a zero-sum return. And Skydance was really cool about that. And Gina was really cool about that. And then Netflix got involved as a production partner when Charlize came in, and Netflix, of course, had notes. And all of a sudden, there were these questions about mythology, why and how. So I was like, I had always had reasons in my hip pocket, because as I'm writing it, I have to know why. I may never share with anybody the why, but I had to know. And all of a sudden, I'm having phone calls, with executives, and they're going like, well, why? And I'm like, I don't want to tell you. I really don't. So,
did they accept that?
No, they didn't. But I think that you can make an argument. You can make an argument as to why they didn't. A film that kind of storytelling requires different things, and I always make a fairly, at least in my head, a fairly clear distinction between an adaptation versus a translation.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, translation to me is the more problematic, because it implies that not a single word has changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is exactly what this thing is. I remember reading a story about Polanski shooting Rosemary's Baby.
Okay.
And contacting Ira Levin to find out what the issue of the New Yorker was in the bathroom for a particular scene, and Levin being like, fuck do I know, man? It was just, Matt, but you know what I mean? It's like, it had to be that precise.
That's awesome.
And I think that you can get into a lot of trouble if you do that. You look at the most recent example for me that comes to mind. Look at the Harry Potter movies. Look at the Lord of the Ring movies, are these translations or are they adaptations?
Mm-hmm.
They always should be an adaptation.
Right.
Because you cannot translate prose one for one.
Right.
It's the same thing with, and it's absolutely the same thing with comics. I mean, if we talk about Stumptown or Lazarus later, and Lazarus is, I think, an even better example of this. If you were to take the first story arc of Lazarus, if you were to take family and go, that is your pilot, that's a 35-minute pilot. I mean, it's not, there's not enough material. It's 4 issues of a comic that move pretty briskly and that rely on a lot of comic storytelling conventions that just don't work in film or on television. You can't do it. And if you try to do it, you're going to end up with crap. So, I try in every instance to go into whatever the experience is with my eyes wide open and with a fairly open heart as to what absolutely I'm willing to see change and what I resolutely and adamantly will not, where the red lines are. And so, what the version of the movie that's being shot, it's not, it is in large part inspired with that initial arc, but there are changes. And actually, I think a lot of changes are for the better. I could go into that too, but I will say that, the experience of writing the screenplay and the demands of that screenplay have served the second series enormously in ways that, I was forced to think about things that I had been able to avoid when I was writing the first series. And the first series, it's odd to me that of everything I've written and everything I've created, right, the Old Guard was literally an idea that came to me one day and I just started writing.
Okay.
It literally was like, here's an idea. Tap, 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 tap. Oh, look, there's a script. I wonder if Leo would draw it. That was pretty much what happened, right?
Okay.
That was not me going, what is going on in the world around me that I feel, I am moved to? Or like in Lazarus, which is, who is this woman who has appeared before me, shot full of bullet holes and trying to tell me her story, or Queen and Country, which was, I always wanted to do a spy thing. I always had an idea who the character would be. I have to do all the research into each operation. Or even Stumptown, which is the result of, as we have talked in previous debriefs about, me having been, effectively breastfed on the Rockford Files.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
I do.
But the Old Guard, I sat down and I was like, I was 3 issues in before I realized, Jesus Christ, I better figure out what this is about. And when people ask me about it, I say it's a Looney Tunes cartoon. The Old Guard is a Looney Tunes cartoon. And Andy is Slappy Squirrel from the Animaniacs, right? But you can't then turn to Charlize Theron and say, Slappy Squirrel, more Slappy Squirrel, because she is not unreasonably going to turn around and say, right, I don't know what character arc that means. Cranky old lady is not an arc.
Sure.
That's not a journey for a character. And never mind, it's funny we ran into this because in the first pass of the screenplay, and you look at Leo's art, and in particular the art in issue 1 on the killing floor. And there's literally a panel where Joe's eyeball is hanging out by the optic nerve, and it's Leo, and it's Daniela's coloring, so it's not disgusting. It's a little comedic. It looks the funny that it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? I do. But you can't do that on screen. Sure. Right? There's no way to do his eyes hanging out. That's funny. You're like, okay, we're going to have to figure out how to reapproach the violence to keep the humor. And that's the other thing that I think has been really delightful about Gina is that she has had her own ideas, and they have been wonderful ideas. But she has never. She gets the funny, and she really gets the characters. I think that they spoke to her enormously.
So I'm looking at her credits, and I didn't realize. Wow, she directed the pilot for Cloak and Dagger. That's excellent, and I guess, and I'm reading the article right now on comingsoon.net that I'm sure is just a repurposed PR, press release from Skydance. But that's cool, and that it's a Netflix film. So, and I realize that in the case of Whiteout, that was an adaptation, or I guess an adaptation. It wasn't a translation, and I don't know how far away from the inner circle you were, but what is the experience of making a Netflix movie? I mean, have you noticed any different? Compare that to what's going on with Stumptown and ABC, for example, or Lazarus.
Well, I mean, it's a Skydance Netflix production.
Okay,
right. So being Skydance is the studio. And then Netflix comes on board basically as, I guess, the distribution and production partner.
Okay.
I don't understand entirely the business of it. So my dealings with Netflix have been few and far between.
It's all been Skydance.
I suspect they don't know my name, and that's fine. And once this thing is done, I don't know if that means this is only going to be a streaming thing or if they're planning on putting it in theaters as well. I have no idea. I just know they're making the thing, and that's a million miles further than I ever thought it would go.
Sure, no, that's awesome. Are you kidding?
So,
Polar.
So I have no complaints there.
Yeah, when Victor Santos said Polar and everything, I'm like, this is great, and it was good. It's a good, you can make a good, reasonably budgeted film. If you do it in a smart way, and I imagine that they're doing it, because it's funny. I just had Rob Burnett on a couple of days ago, and we were talking about how maybe the medium-sized budget films are where do they go? And they have been going to Netflix. I mean, that's where the medium budget films have been going, and I would think Old Guard would be something that you can make at a reasonable price and everything. So why not? This is good.
I mean, I wrote it to be relatively cheap. Cheap being, for a given value of cheap in Hollywood.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was written to be made for under $40 million.
There you go. Yeah.
But then you get certain ads like Netflix and Charlize.
Well, yeah.
And all of a sudden they need more money, but all of a sudden there is more money to be spent. So I don't know what the final budget is on it. I know, and frankly, I'm not terribly involved in the production. I've been doing some rewrites on request and things like that. They've had a couple other people come in and look at it and work on it. And, everything that I'm seeing and hearing so far, I'm happy. I'm happier than I have any right to be, frankly. I mean, apparently everybody spent 3 months training.
Wow!
And they got cast, and then it was like off the weapons training with you, And they're and one of the other really cool things I just am excited about is that they're correcting obvious oversights on my part, because so much of the time, I'll put out a comic and then I'll move on. Right? I'll be on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. I won't have time to revisit or to reevaluate or to look at the work, because once it's out in the world, you can't fix it, right? It's done. Mm-hmm. And so I find myself in this position where it's sort of like getting a second bite at the Old Guard apple. And as I said, I've been able, just in writing it, I was able to correct things that not necessarily through negligence, but through limitations of comics and of the storytelling in comics got short shrift. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you a really obvious example is you never see Mickey use his longsword, right? I mean, that's just a really basic one, right? But there's Mickey, he's carrying a longsword, he never uses it, right?
Yeah.
What the hell's the point of that? Right?
It looked cool.
Yeah, exactly. It looked cool. I'll give you another example. We put the Crusader's Cross on Mickey's armor.
Okay.
Right, as a comic book shorthand to indicate something about his era and his background, Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
My understanding, and I'm not 100% sure of this, but so Luca got cast, and Gina was working really closely with every actor that she cast, right? And then she would send me, I would get like a call or an email from her because she's been in London since January.
That's where they're shooting. Okay.
Yeah, they're shooting in London, and they're going to shoot in France, and I believe they're shooting in Morocco.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. But so I would get an occasional call, quite frequently a text, every now and then an email, and it would be a specific question. It would be like, so I was meeting with, for instance, I was meeting with the actor who's playing Nicky, and he wanted to know about the Crusader's Cross. This was actually an email, and I wrote her back, right? And I wrote back, the email I wrote back is like, well, this is why it was done, right? This was the purpose of it.
Sure.
This is to indicate both that Nicky is the one member of the team who has really any sort of inner spiritual life. It was to indicate his era. And then I had a second paragraph saying, now, all that said, there is a very good argument to be made that wearing a Crusader's cross is as potentially problematic as flying a Confederate flag.
Sure. Yes. Good.
And
good.
And if we want to address that, I have absolutely no problem with the Crusader's cross not being included.
Interesting.
And to the best of my knowledge, not included.
Okay, interesting.
I think the actor was uncomfortable with it. And, Gina's response to my email was, I had no idea. That is a very good point.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of ongoing conversations that they've been involved in. And honestly, they don't need to involve me in any of it.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
I mean, the way this works is I wrote it. They paid me. They have every right to say, see you at the premiere, Rucka.
Yeah, yeah.
So...
Interesting.
Well,
they give a shit, and that's good.
Yeah, they really do.
That's what it comes down to, yeah.
I have to say, I've gone to the Hollywood Rodeo countless times over the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And this is far and beyond one of the best experiences I've ever had.
Excellent.
I was talking to another friend, the fact that but really in any endeavor, you always hit what I've come to call the stupid wall.
Sure.
And the question is really how fast you're going when you hit it, and how early you hit it are the only questions. You will hit the stupid wall.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, somebody is going to bring you the stupid, and you won't be able to avoid it. Eventually, you're going to hit that wall. And the stupid wall on the old guard. It turned out to be a stupid speed bump, and it was way, way down the runway. So, it's been remarkable. It's been remarkable.
That's awesome, man. No, I'm really excited for this. And truly, I was not expecting to be talking about this, so it's wonderful to hear. And really, honestly...
I'm kind of surprised. Normally, you're better prepared for these debriefs, John.
Well, I don't know.
You're a busy guy.
No, I don't know how this news escaped me. And it's great because, we'll get to it and everything. But, I saw the Stumptown teaser, obviously, and I knew that was in motion. Okay, great.
Uh-huh.
I know Lazarus has been in motion and everything. I know that, and we'll get to comic book talk about, Lois Lane and the like. And, this is great. And honestly, I am fascinated in that, we live in interesting times way of what's going on in the streaming world and media altogether. I mean, God, with Fox and Disney merging and just the realities. I mean, God, as we're talking this week, economics didn't work out for Swamp Thing, so they announced that it's canceled before the second episode even airs. I mean, we'll get all 10 episodes, but they
may bring it back. It'll depend on how people respond, but the difference of the $40 million missing rebate that they were promised,
exactly,
and that didn't go through.
Yep.
That's a real,
in
a year ago, Warner Brothers might have soaked that. This year, AT&T is going, that is an unreasonable loss and we will not.
Right.
and you're going to see, I think, a lot more of that sort of accounting coming out of Warner Brothers now, because they are now AT&T.
Yep.
So.
Yep. No, it's going to be interesting. And again, that's interesting times. And that means that some people are going to be getting pink slips, and some things will be greenlit, and the way we consume media is going to change in some way. It'll be very, very interesting. And that's truly, I mean, as successful as the Netflix television shows have been, I am interested in these Netflix movies as they happen as well. And I do think that, no, there's, I mean, and I've seen good ones. I've seen good teen comedies. I've seen decent regular comedies, and I've seen decent action movies. And like I said, I thought Polar was great. And I don't know, I don't know what parent production company made it, but I thought it was terrific.
Nor do I. But I loved Roma.
Yes,
I thought Roma was
of course.
So, I think that clearly, this has been coming for a while. Everybody who was so shocked about Disney Plus hadn't been paying attention. Disney Plus was in the works. It was coming. It was known to be coming. Mm-hmm. And if anybody thought that Disney was going to half-ass that, they were high. But my understanding was that I was talking to Fraction, who I guess was down in L.A. when Disney Plus unveiled their slate. And he said it was like a meteor hit, and all the dinosaurs went, "What the hell was that boom?" And then panicked because the sun went out. But, I think that's in part what you're seeing too. You're going to see all of these other studios / networks / broadcasters, these content providers going, oh, this is not just the format for putting out, 1 or 2 or 3 new shows. Like we'll do Discovery and The Twilight Zone and maybe, a couple other.
Yep.
This is the way it works now.
Yep.
This is the way it happens now. And when I had been over in the UK for Thought Bubble.
Okay.
And I was coming back. I had to make a connection in Denver, and I literally got off the phone and I got a call from the exec I deal with at Skydance, and then the exec that I've been working with. Like basically the guy I'd been working with all throughout the writing, and his boss. And his boss, who is a fucking genius, basically called, like I'm walking down the concourse, and he says, "You got a minute?" And I'm like, yeah. Because you always say, yeah, unless something's on fire, And he said, so this, that, and Netflix, it looks like we're going to get Netflix involved as a producing partner. And I said, okay. And there was this pause, and he says, you're all right with that? And I said, yeah, I'm all right with that. And he said, because you don't sound terribly enthusiastic. I said, no, I mean, look, I don't jump up and down on the phone. I'm not going to do that. It sounds great. And he says, okay, because I know that a lot of people are like, oh, it was going to be in a theater, and this may change that. And I'm like, dude, you guys are making it. I don't have anything to complain about.
Sure.
If 13 million people go and see something in a theater, but 120 million see it at home, in the comfort of their living room because they saw it on Netflix, well, guess which one had more people seeing it?
Exactly.
Yes. So it's kind of a no-brainer. But it's the way that whole beast is changing.
Yeah, but it seems, and again, it's easy for me as a consumer to say this, but it seems like that's okay because I don't want these things to disappear completely. And if the theater is going to become the spectacle venue, as it rightfully should, gigantic screen, unbelievable sound system. I mean, IMAX, if you're fortunate that they make it that way. Why not? I mean, that's the thing. It's okay. The game moved over to this platform. And that's, I don't think that's a bad thing.
I think that there's a middle ground. I don't think we're going to see the extinction of these small film in a theater. I do think that things like, for God's sakes, Endgame. Endgame breaks the whole paradigm anyway. It just absolutely, utterly devastates studio blockbuster summer movie making. Mm-hmm. that it has destroyed it.
Yeah.
And the lesson that people are going to take from it, unfortunately, is the wrong one.
Yes.
I think, but because what the executives are not going to say is this was part 22 of a 22-part miniseries. That's not how they look at it. They go, this was a film. It made this much money. It's like, no, but it wasn't a film. It was the end stage delivery of a 10-year ridiculous number of movies.
Yeah. 21.
It's
21 movies before.
Yeah. And you didn't have to see all of them, but implicit in Endgame was that you had.
Well, yeah, and my sister was like, do I need to see this? I'm like, you haven't seen any Marvel movies. She's like, I haven't. I'm like, you don't need to see this. I said, you'd be lost. Yep. I said, really? I don't mean to cut you out of the experience. Because she's like, well, I see what's happening. And she remembers all the original 3 and that kind of excitement. And Harry Potter, her kids were young enough to appreciate Harry Potter and everything. So, yeah, it's just like, is this something I need? I'm like, no. Actually, no. But it's okay. Yeah. So, no, you're right about that. And yes, it seems everyone wants franchises. And I agree with you. The smaller movies, will still find a way. It is this middle ground that I do think, was kind of for a moment searching for a home. I mean, I always use Two Guns as an example. The film and the comic, because, when that came out, you had Denzel and you had Mark Wahlberg. That easily would have been a summer hit 10 years earlier. Yeah. And then it just kind of slipped through the cracks and found its audience at Redbox and on cable and everything. And now Netflix has taken its place alongside those things. And I'm like, I think it's a good venue, and especially for a lot of our kind of movies in terms of heist movies and good crime movies and good straight up drama and things. Certainly horror. Horror is easy, isn't it? Interesting. I think horror is the one genre that can still make a $20 million movie and kick ass.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure that the first John Wick was actually done relatively cheaply. Mm-hmm. And that success has now led to 2 others, and obviously what will be a 4th.
Yes,
where the budgets have clearly gone.
Yes,
they keep going bigger and bigger and bigger. So
he's going to space next. He has to.
Yeah. ISS Continental. There you are. So.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Yeah, anyway, let's get back to your stuff. Unless please finish your comment.
No. I have nothing else to add, because we could bore people with this for another hour. No. I don't see the need. So,
well, let's talk Stumptown, because that was great, man. I'm so glad they released that kind of 3-minute scene.
That was a long trailer, man.
But that was terrific. I mean, that was great. You really get a good sense of what to expect, and again, a nice adaptation. I think they get the flavor of what you're doing here.
Yeah, the showrunner, the guy who wrote the pilot, Jason Richman, he was very true to Dax, and you see it, and for something like this, and Justin and Matthew and I have all been, keeping an eye on it. Obviously, it's. Again, talking about adaptation versus translation, you're not going to adapt Stumptown as, an hour-long Wednesday night at 10 ABC drama-esque, PI-esque show. You just can't. There are 4 arcs, right? So what is that? That's 2.5 episodes if you do them all verbatim. You know what I mean? So in this case, this is absolutely a case. This is absolutely an instance of, do the people who are making it get the characters? Are they being true to the characters? Are they being, are the changes that they're making to the characters changes that make sense for the medium and the nature of that kind of serial narrative on television, as opposed to a serial narrative in comics? I have seen the pilot. I have seen 2 different cuts of the pilot at this point. I think it is a really good pilot.
Great.
I am probably not to be trusted, but I personally think I'm actually a very hard audience to please, and just in general. And I get incredibly self-conscious when I see anything that is quote unquote mine, either in whole or in part being adapted. I tend to be really cringy. I didn't cringe in this. And I suppose that sounds like damning with faint praise. It's not. For me, that's a really high bar. I actually was like, this is really fun. This is good and enjoyable. And Kobe is just unbelievably charismatic and delightful. Like, if they had called the show, watch Kobe Smulders Wednesdays at 10 for an hour, you would show up.
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah.
It was just,
no, I've loved her since How I Met Your Mother. No, she's beautiful, but she's very funny. And I think and to be honest, hey, a great Maria Hill, but frankly, it held her back. I mean, she did fine with what they gave her, but that's the thing. I think Stumptown, she's really getting a chance to cut loose, and she's funny.
Oh yeah, no, this is hers, and she's got a great sense of humor, and it's perfect for Dax.
Yeah,
and she's got just the right hard luck, and she's got all the heart. The young man who's playing Ansel, his name is Cole. I have yet to actually meet him because they did the initial pilot shoot, all the studio stuff in Vancouver, and I didn't go up for that. And then they came to Portland to do all the exteriors. Mm-hmm. So I was on set for that. Ansel's mostly interiors. So I didn't get to meet Cole. But his and Kobe's chemistry is terrific. You believe the relationship. He is just fantastic. I don't have a bad thing to say about it. And again, I know that sounds like I'm waving cheerleader pom-poms. And if I'm perfectly honest, if I didn't like it, I would hardly be doing the interview saying, I wouldn't watch it. But the flip side is I would probably steer the conversation away. You know what I mean? And I'm dead sincere. I was delighted. And the things that they, like I said, the changes they have made for it, to make it television, mm-hmm. for lack of a better phrase, mm-hmm. Every one of them has been like, yeah, I understand that. I understand that decision. That was a solid decision. I had a friend in Australia who was a little, when she saw the trailer, was really ticked off that Tracy Hoffman had been turned into a guy, right? Okay. That Michael Healy's character is Hoffman, and was like, this is a queer erasure. I was like, it's not. They don't have the rights to Hoffman because Hoffman appears initially in Fistful of Rain, and they don't have the rights to that book. Okay. They have the rights to Stumptown. So, they can't be the same Hoffman. And at that point, she was like, oh, okay. But everybody involved read all the comics. Everybody involved, they clearly knew the source material. They knew what they knew where they were coming from. And that's unbelievable if you think about it. There was every reason to believe that they were like, yeah, well, we'll take the name of the character and the name of the series, and we'll see you later. So,
well, it's an interesting time in network television because this is not going to be a cakewalk. And and I think luckily you got Kobe on the show, and she is so great, and people do love her and everything. So I do think that'll help. But I felt that way about Karen Sisko, which I'm sure you agree was a good show. And, you had Carla Gugino, however you say her last name, Gugino or whatever, Gugino. And, it didn't make it. And it's a shame because she was terrific in it. And that was a good, tough, PI show and everything that was fun while it lasted.
But, look, I wish I wish, like you wish that quality was the metric of success.
Yep.
We both know we don't live in that world, so they're gonna do, I don't know. I guess I don't know what the order has been. I don't know if it was a full season or a half season with a pickup.
Sure.
I really don't. I probably should know, but I genuinely don't. It's possible this thing's gonna take off like a rocket. It's possible that people will show up for the pilot and then be like, not interested. And God knows what will be the arbiter of that decision. If it'll be that, Wednesday night at 10 is a bad slot for it. If it'll be that something in the universal gestalt says that's not what we want to watch right now. There's a reason why there hasn't been a pure PI show on TV in a while. And I don't know what that reason is. But clearly there is one, because there hasn't been. The last pure PI show I can think of was Terriers.
Yes, FX, yeah.
Right.
Donnell Loge.
But everything else, since then, it's always been, it's detective with a twist.
Right. Well, even Magnum PI is more of a team show than a pure PI show.
Yeah, yeah, and I have had, I suppose it says something that I've had no interest in seeing that at all.
I'm with you.
That's not my Magnum.
Yeah, well, that's again, it's always that question of property versus vehicle, as far as an idea, a story idea, and I mean that's the thing. It's like, yeah, man, I'm sorry, I'm Tom Selleck's Magnum, and it doesn't make sense for there to be another one. Just like Garner was Rockford and Maverick.
Yeah.
And even
and I would argue, okay, but now this is actually a retread of stuff we've talked about, years ago. But I would argue that you don't remake PI TV. You don't go, if you're going to say let's do a Rockford Files, right?
Yeah.
You do a Rockford Files with a different Rockford.
Right,
you
a different name, yeah.
No, you can keep the name if you want the legacy, right? If you want the legacy, but you don't do it with we're going to have a Jim Rockford, and we're going to have Dennis, the Firebird, and we're going to have an Angel, and we're going to have a Rocky, and we're going to have a Beth, and we're going to have a Dennis. You don't do that, right? What you do is you go, this is Phil Rockford,
sure,
right?
Phil
and Phil and Phil,
I'm already not watching.
Isn't, but you see what? But here's why. But here's why you got to change it, John. Is that these are fundamentally what the private eye is fundamentally a product of their era.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yes. Go on.
Rockford is a 70s creation.
Yes.
He's a post-Watergate, right?
Yeah. Literally,
recession, Recession. Gas shortage character. He is a character. He is a character who. No, I mean we know he's been in prison. It was unclear if he's an ex-con. He is. I'm fuzzy on it. My memory is that he didn't do what he was convicted of, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which that's a referendum on the society. We put an innocent man in jail, all right?
Yep.
Except Jim's not honest.
Right.
Jim's greatest skill set as the series goes on is his ability to con people.
Yep.
He's a great con artist.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So, he financially is insecure. Every case is about him chasing down the fee, trying to get paid, not having the money. Right. I've rewatched The Hammer of C Block. Right.
Yes.
Which
Isaac Hayes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the first Gandalf episode. Right. It's the first Gandhi.
Mm-hmm.
And if you rewatch that would never be on network television today.
I believe it.
It would never make the cut. It would have been considered too dark and too hard. Gandhi would have been seen as unsympathetic, and the resolution of that mystery is really bleak.
Interesting.
And really, really morally problematic. Like, you look at it and you're like, Gandhi is not without sin at all. And yet that story is the story about these two guys who really aren't friends at the beginning, sort of reaching a friendship at the end. I mean, this is in, at that point, 55 minutes of television. Because back then, an hour-long episode was almost an hour long, right?
Yep.
As opposed to now 42 minutes.
Sad but true.
But you can't tell that story on television, on network television. You can't do it.
Yeah.
It would never make it, even at a 10 o'clock slot. It wouldn't make it. I'm sure it wouldn't make it.
Interesting.
You look at Magnum as a product of the 80s.
Totally.
He is a Reagan-era creation. He is, I am fond of saying that the iconic shot, and you get it in each of them. In the opening credits to Rockford, there's a shot of Jim shopping.
Yes.
In a grocery market. He's got a package of steaks or whatnot in his hand. That's his life, right? This is a guy who's having to count his pennies.
Yep.
The iconic shot in Magnum, in the Selleck Magnum, is him in his navy dress whites in this dark room being lit by, the green of these radar screens and all that. It's the power of, of American military might and technology. So much of that series is about, we didn't lose Vietnam, it was a draw. I mean, all the characters are dealing with Vietnam to one extent or another. And even Higgins, who wasn't in Vietnam, is carrying some level of PTSD.
Interesting.
And then look at where he's living. He's freeloading in the guest house on a multimillionaire's, estate in Hawaii. This is not a guy who has to worry about being paid.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It is a different. It is a different moment in time. It is a different society. It is a, look at, ironically, coming in the late 70s, which is still dealing with, the fallout of the 60s and free love and so on. Jim doesn't sleep around.
Right.
Jim, and this is probably a fair representation of what Garner wanted of the series, of what Juanita Bartlett wanted of the series. But Jim's relationship with women in the 70s in Rockford is much more as peers.
Yes.
Very, very hard to name a woman in the original Magnum series, right, who was a recurring character of merit or strength. Women were normally beautiful objects.
Yeah.
Right? But if you look at Rockford, you can name Beth right off the bat, right? I forget the name of the Rita Moreno character.
Rita Moreno's character. She won Emmys for
what I mean?
portrayal. Absolutely, yeah. And she was a recurring character,
you're
right. But definitely Beth. Definitely Beth, yeah.
Yeah. But, and the relationship with Beth had romantic tension, but it was never, it was never the drive of the series.
Sure. Was Lindsay Wagner a recurring character? Am I remembering that right?
I think so. Yeah. I think she showed up in a couple as well, and I can't remember the name of her character either. Yeah. But so this is why you say, well, we're going to redo Magnum PI in 2018. It's like, well, okay, then it's got to be something different.
Yeah.
And it's got to be different. It's got to take the tropes and redress them. And this is why I say you can remake Rockford, but you don't remake Rockford as another Jim Rockford.
Yeah.
The era has changed.
Yes.
So this Jim Rockford maybe is also an ex-con, right? Is also getting out of prison, maybe was also a con artist, but we changed the nature of what those cons are. We changed the nature of who they're surrounded by. There are analogs. There's a Rocky analog and an Angel analog and so on, because these are tropes of the genre. One of the things, I'm in theory, I'm going to go down and talk to the writers' room on Stumptown because Jason has asked me to.
Great.
And I will give them my lecture on the importance of the American private investigator as a means of social commentary. I will tell you right now, and I've already had a slight conversation with Jason about this. I am adamant that at some point in the season they introduce CK. CK has been in one arc of 4.
Okay.
CK is in our 3rd arc.
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
She's in the Case of the King of Clubs. She's the PI from Seattle who comes down. She's an African American PI, and she and Dex clearly have professional respect. They give each other shit. There is a friendship there. All right.
Okay.
You need CK in the series, and I would argue very strongly they're going to have to introduce CK.
Okay.
Because the detective needs somebody who is willing to do what they do, is willing to hold them back from doing the things they shouldn't do, and is sometimes willing to do them themselves. And this is why, you have, this is why in the literature you have characters like Hawk.
Yes.
Or like Mouse, or you have, Joe Pike in the Elvis Coles.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
There is a place for these characters. That character changes depending on your era and what's going on. But that is CK's purpose in the grand design. Never mind who the character is and what that character is, but the purpose in the genre, in the storytelling, is to fulfill a certain role, and you need to be able to do this because if the character is, if Dex is able to do this, then Dex isn't who Dex is. You change who that person is. It's basically going, Kirk doesn't need Spock or McCoy. Mm-hmm. Is sort of the problem you get. If you create a Kirk who can do everything Spock does and everything that McCoy does, then you don't need Spock and McCoy.
Right.
But then Kirk isn't Kirk.
No, then he's Michael Burnham. Sorry. Sorry. Moving on.
Yeah. Anyway, so Stumptown, ABC,
Indeed.
10 p.m. Wednesday.
I'm excited. No, dude, seriously, this is great, and I do think you're being given a real opportunity to win with this. I don't know what the other shows are opposite.
The joke around the house has been, it's only taken 25 years to become an overnight success. So if everything keeps going the way it's going this year, I'm an overnight success. So,
Well, I hope. Hey, man, this is true, and I hope the other, executives are paying attention at what source material people are going to for this stuff. This is great. So, now obviously,
praise the Lord and pass the ammunition. Yeah.
Hey, man, are you planning on doing a Stumptown of 4th volume in time for, or 5th volume in time for a?
Yeah, Justin and I have actually been talking about it for about 2 years now.
Sure.
And suddenly there's a new impetus to getting our asses in gear.
Sure. That's cool. Now, with the changes at Oni, how has that affected you, if at all?
It hasn't, at least as yet.
Okay.
And Oni has been really supportive and on board and sort of backing the ABC play. And I know, in fact, that they're in touch with ABC marketing.
Good.
So that I believe they're each trying to leverage one another.
Sure.
It's funny, because every so often, like, my manager will be like, okay, this person is looking at, say, this property. They want to know what your numbers were. And I'm like, no, they don't.
Yeah, really.
Like, they really, really don't. Yeah. Because comic book numbers are going to scare them.
Sure.
They're going to be like, wait, it only sold 13,000 copies? I'm like, yep. And that's a stunning success, yes, considering it's not from one of the big two.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's an overwhelming, unqualified success for a black and white indie. Right? But if you tell that to an exec, they're going to be like, oh my God, we're going to die. It's like, I don't know what to tell you, man. I don't know what to tell you. So she calls and she'll be like, yeah, they want to know what the numbers were on on Black Magick, for instance, I'll be like, no, they really don't need that information, and it's only going to hurt us. Don't tell them. If they really want to find out, they can do the Google search.
Is Black Magick in play for a possible option?
Black Magick has been optioned and is in development. I don't know when or if that will execute. And that's really all I can say on it.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where Nicola and I were like, oh, all right, go ahead.
Sure.
Because Black Magick has always been, and we knew this the moment people started going, is this available? Can we option it? And Nick and I had this very long conversation going, everybody in the world is going to get this wrong. Because until we're done with the series, they're not going to understand what the series is about.
Okay.
So what they're all seeing is witch cop.
Right.
She's a witch who's also a cop. Right? She's a witch with a badge. But that's what they see.
Sure.
Right? And we knew
witch cop.
We knew that. And we would talk to people and we would say, you see witch cop. What you don't see is that her being a cop is just her job. Mm-hmm. We could have made her an accountant. It's just that would have been harder to draw and not as sexy. Right? So she's a cop.
Right.
But this is less about the cop than it is about the fact that she is Wiccan.
Right. And not just a witch, but she is Wiccan. Exactly. The religion and everything.
And this is, and there's a tension in her life. And this is also about the philosophy underlying magic. Mm-hmm. And if you say that to an executive, they blink a lot. And then they go, we really like the witch cop and the talking cat, and you sit there and you go, all right, that's fine. So that isn't to say that the people who are developing it are dumbing it down. It is to say that even more so than, say, Stumptown, if they get Black Magick to a series, it's going to be, there'll be a main character named Rowan Blaack. But beyond that, she'll be a cop and she'll be a witch. Those are the things I'm certain of. Anything else is like, I have no idea, man.
Right.
I have no idea.
No, I get it. And I mean, no, you're right. But it is interesting because I think we're at a point where if in the right hands, God, who would have thought Doom Patrol would be as accurate as it's been? I don't know if you've had a chance to watch it.
I haven't, but I'm not actually surprised because one of the things that's going on there, and this again, it depends on the market, yep. Right? You can get Doom Patrol right because you're not trying to sell it to people who are not already going to be interested in what Doom Patrol is. Mm-hmm. If Doom Patrol had been on the CW,
that wouldn't happen.
It would be a very, very different looking show.
Absolutely. Oh, 100%.
Right?
100%. Absolutely, man.
I mean, it would look, it would be almost unrecognizable as the Doom Patrol. You would be like, they're calling it Doom Patrol, but it makes far too much sense.
No, they'd all be teenagers, and every episode would end with a song that you can find on iTunes immediately after the episode. That Smallville template that started 20 years ago. No, I hear you, man. Hey, by the way, taking nothing away from the CW shows, I am thrilled that they exist.
No,
and
exactly. It's not to malign it. It's to say that you're sitting there and you are selling a different.
Yeah.
You're selling a different item. Some people want steak. Some people want fried chicken. Some people want a burger with fries. Some people want a Caesar salad. And some people want a Caesar salad, but they don't want anchovy in the dressing. And all of that's fine. Doom Patrol on, DC's app is very much, it's Ratatouille with truffle oil.
Yes.
What I mean?
Very much so.
It is that, and there are a whole lot of people in the world who are going to go, I thought Ratatouille was the name of a rat.
Right. Yeah. No,
wasn't that a movie?
Not the animated movie. Exactly. The real Ratatouille.
Exactly.
The dish. Absolutely, man. So, I'm with you. That's hilarious. No, but that's why it's a very interesting time, and these properties in the right hands will become very special and only help. I think make people aware of the original source material. I mean, I know it doesn't translate into millions, but I do think it translates into thousands. And I do think that, as you say, when 13,000 made Stumptown a hit and everything, it's like, yeah, you'll take a couple more 5-figure clumps of people that are like, oh, dude, hey, let me read that.
Yeah, I'm not going to sneeze at that. And honestly, you know, it's mattered to do these deals in a way that everybody involved gets some piece of the pie.
Sure.
On Stumptown, you know, Justin and Matthew and I are well taken care of. Ryan and Lee are not so much, and we need to redress that. And one of the ways I want to be able to redress that is by changing the royalty split on the trade.
That's cool.
Right, and saying, okay, then I am, you know, I've got to drop mine. We have to really bump theirs because they should at least in some way benefit from that largesse.
Yep.
So you know what? If we suddenly are selling 50,000 copies of Stumptown, that's going to be a really nice royalty check.
Wonderful.
And you know, great.
Yeah.
You know, that's as it should be. So
definitely. Well, so how are you balancing everything right now before we move on to the next property?
Poorly.
Yeah. Well,
Poorly.
You know, yeah, I would imagine. Well, no, this is, as you say, I mean, this is, you know, you want to strike while the iron's hot, and now you're an overnight success 25 years later. You know.
Yeah, it only took 25 years. I'm really, really, really busy.
Sure.
And I need to, I'm writing a thing right now for Skydance, and I have to finish it this weekend. And Mike is drawing Lois Lane 5 as we speak.
Excellent.
And Lark is drawing Lazarus Risen number 3 as we speak.
Wonderful.
Which is actually, it's more than wonderful. He's drawing issue 3. Issue 2 doesn't come out till July. So it may be the first time in the history of the series where we're actually, and I know I'm going to jinx myself the moment I say this, we're actually on schedule, if not ahead of it. Nicola has been dealing with one thing after another, but she is actually back to drawing Blaack Magick, so we're going to have the next arc wrapped up, hopefully in the next month or two. And then once that's all locked, that'll be solicited. We haven't solicited Blaack Magick because we wanted to wait till we had the next 5 all done.
Okay.
Because almost every book I was doing had fallen into this pattern of we would hit first month, second month, and then we would end up skipping. And I don't want to do that anymore. So, you know, somebody referred to it as the saga model, and maybe that is the way to put it. I got no problem with you know, stealing a very good Brian K. Vaughan idea. I could probably stand to steal several more very good Brian K. Vaughan ideas. So, but yeah, we're gonna get all this next arc done, and then we'll solicit it. And then ideally, having done that, we will be on track to. We will have the arc after that done.
Okay.
And then we'll be on track. Blaack Magick's always had a very finite number of issues. I've always known where it was going to end. And if we can do this, we'll wrap it up by about 2021, 22.
Oh, wow.
And then Lazarus is going to depend on a number of factors, how much longer it goes. There are at least 4 more arcs before that thing ends, okay. But it could be, I could easily make it 8.
Wow.
Mostly it'll depend on whether or not, Michael is still into it, and if it is worth his while, as much as anything else. We're going to finish it. It's just a question of when we'll finish it.
Okay.
And I suspect that'll be largely influenced by whether or not there's a TV thing that happens there. So.
Where are we on development for Lazarus?
I actually have to be somewhat circumspect about this because things have been up in the air at Amazon. We have had some changes in the approach. I'm working with a guy who actually came up to Portland about a month ago, and he and I he and I tend to interview potential showrunners the same way. I tend to meet them and say, let's go for a walk. And that walk was 10 miles when all was said and done. So it went really well. I can't give his name. When his name is released, people who know the name will respond. I think fairly strongly. The change means there is. I'm much more optimistic than I was, say, a year ago about where we were in the development process on that. Nothing is for sure.
Okay.
But like I said, this could be the year that I'm suddenly an overnight success. So it's looking good there as far as I'm concerned.
Cool. Well,
yeah.
Well, regarding the book, obviously, and as you said, so the first issue came out back in March, and how many issues is the story going to be? You had a 44-page beginning to it, obviously.
Yeah, the arcs are going to be 3-issue arcs.
Okay.
So Risen number 3 will end the Fracture 1 arc. And then the plan is for Risen number 4 to be a standalone. And then issues 5, 6, and 7 will be the Fracture 2 arc. And I'm not going to say anything else about what happens after that.
Okay.
We're coming up on some things are going to change in the series. It's funny because Michael and I have these conversations, and now Alejandro Arbona is our editor.
Okay. So
we have these conversations. He's drawing the end of issue 2, and he said, I really don't know what's going on with this character in this scene. I just, I've never been able to trust this character, and I don't believe what they're saying, and so on. And I actually, in this email chain, I said, actually, character in question is telling the truth. It's character, Y, who is going to betray them. And the response I got, was like all these exclamation points. Michael and I have this thing where he's like, half the time he doesn't want to know, and half the time he needs to, but I think he wants to get the scripts and sort of be able to be surprised. And there is a piece of me, since he's the first audience for me,
sure.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a piece of me that doesn't want him to know it's coming because I want to see what his reaction is. I want to see if he responds to it. But there are other times when he's like, "Yeah, I got to know." I was in Dallas for Free Comic Book Day, doing the signing at Zeus Comics, cool. and we were participating in a fundraiser for Lila Sturgis. And Michael and I had this long conversation about sort of the future, where the series is going. He doesn't know where it's going to end, right? And he's told me he doesn't want to know.
Okay.
But I realized over the course of this conversation that we're actually coming up on a break point where I'm going to have to say, okay, maybe I need to fly down to Dallas and take you out for dinner and say, this is where the series is going. Because he's going to need to know soon.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And Michael's not. I mean, none of my collaborators on these. I mean, none of them are. None of them are puppets that I'm sticking an arm up and going, "Now you draw this thing as I wrote it."
Sure.
Every one of them, they're a genuine collaborator. I talk to Nicola. I say, "This is what's going on." I talked to Leo. I talked to another artist who I can't talk about yet, who was drawing a thing.
Okay.
That hopefully we'll be announcing end of summer, maybe the fall.
Cool.
But Michael, I think Michael and I had the most ongoing conversations, I think, for whatever reason. I think our engagement on Lazarus is different. And it's not that he'll say this story should do this or you need to do this or whatnot, but he's never shy about his opinion.
Okay.
And so I'll say, well, this is where I'm going with this. And then he'll be like, I don't think you should go there. I don't think that's a good idea. And sometimes he's dead right. And sometimes he's dead wrong. And the dead right examples are, for instance, the first draft of the first issue that I gave him, he threw back at me and he said, "I am not drawing this, and you need to rewrite it."
Wow.
And I reread it, and I was like, "Ooh, you're right."
Wow.
I mean, he literally was like, "This is not what you told me it would be, and this does not work."
Wow.
Flip side is I'd been trying to get back to Jonah for forever, and he had been saying, "I don't think we should do it, and I don't want to take time away from forever." I was like, "We need to tell this story." And, he did the 2 issues with Jonah and came back and was like, "Okay, those are like my favorite issues." So, I mean, the give and take there is very, very active. With Nicola, it tends to be, much more me, because she knows where we're going. She's known from the start. Mm-hmm. So, with her, it's like, okay, we're doing this piece now. And those conversations tend to be much more me going, how do you want to do this? Or have you given any thought to the way you'd like me to approach this? So it's interesting. And then with Leo, I've rewritten the opening of the second issue of the second series of Old Guard. Mm-hmm. I did that rewrite earlier this week to send to him. And the result of that is that there's now a 6-page sequence that, nobody's ever going to see, or will maybe be included in a hardcover because he had already drawn it. And I was like, we can't use it. It's not good. And it's not that you failed it. It's that I did. I asked you to draw a thing that just doesn't work, that is bad for the series and bad for the story. And he took it like, Grace doesn't even begin to describe it. He was like, "Yeah, okay."
No, you're right, because that's obviously a lot of time invested.
Yeah. I'm really sorry about this, Leo. He's like, no problem. It's okay.
That's great.
I like this better.
That's great.
So I was like, okay, we're good. Well, he's happy, because they're making the movie. So
that's true.
Nothing else. I mean, if nothing else, at the end of the day, he's like, yeah, you know what? I can redraw 6 pages. It's okay.
That's good.
But it's not a habit. It's not a habit I want to be in.
I understand.
It feels like wasting his time and energy. And I honestly can say, I think it's the first time in 21 years of writing comics that I've ever asked that of an artist. So I suppose that's a pretty good track record.
So as you say, issue 2 for Risen is going to be coming out in July, and then so then is are we going to get September for issue 3? What's the plan?
It should be August, September, August. It should be November.
November, okay.
Because we're doing
and I mean they are oversized issues, obviously too.
Yeah, they're 64 pages.
Yeah. So and mentioning Lila, obviously she has a story in there as well.
Yeah, she did the short story in Risen 1. Adam Christopher has done the short story for issue 2.
Okay.
Adam is, I suspect almost everybody who's listening to the podcast knows who Lila is.
Indeed.
They may not know who Adam is. Adam is a really wonderful novelist. He's a New Zealander who lives in England. He's he's doing, I think his most recent credits would be the Stranger Things novels that are being done.
Okay.
He's running those, but he's a sharp tack, and I really like his writing. And I actually approached him. I was like, "Would you consider doing a short?" And he jumped on it. So I'm really excited about that. And I have the issue 3 short story is lined up. I got to figure out who we're going to approach for issue 4. But then we've got, like I say, you get 44 pages of the comic, and then you get the short story with Michael Spaudellos. You get 2 pages of a section called Lazarus Tools of War that is effectively a supplement for the Lazarus RPG that's published by Green Ronin. We get an artifact or 2 in there, not counting the back cover piece, and then you get, whoever wants to pick a fight with Greg. And then you get the reading list and things like that. So, it matters. it matters just as much now, if not more, as it ever did at the beginning, that, people feel they're getting their money's worth, that it's not a read you can burn through.
Absolutely. No, it's an intense world, and all you've done is add to it with those and the appendices and the the various I forget what you called them, the source books and everything.
Yeah, the source books, and we're looking at doing another one of those, actually.
Sure.
So there's a piece of me that thinks maybe starting with issue 4, we'll do basically the equivalent of a source book page as well, just start dropping in some further world embellishment.
Okay.
Because again, this goes back actually to what we were talking about at the beginning about the old guard and and sort of the difference between adapting it for the screen and the comic. Which is there's just, we talk about comics as this very liberating medium. You can do anything, the budget doesn't matter, and so on. But there's one thing in a comic that you can never get around, and that's the amount of room you have to work in.
Mm-hmm. Or lack thereof.
Yeah. And that is always the limitation. And there is always more to be pulled. There's always more to be shown. So every comic, and this is arguably the restriction on every artistic form, be it painting, be it poetry, be it movies, be it television. But every choice you are making to tell the story is a decision that sacrifices something else. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, taking it back to the old guard, the first series, Opening Fire, is Andy's story. It is about Andy. It is the story of this woman who, in very broad strokes, has lost her will to live. And it is about her sort of rediscovering that. As a result of that, Joe and Nikki and Booker get some elaboration, but they don't get a lot. Like, you have an idea of what's motivating them in sort of a very broad shorthand, right?
Sure.
But Nile in that series, almost nothing about her.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
You get so little about Nile. And when it comes to, writing a screenplay, every character has to be served equally. Every character has to have their heart and their story. Mm-hmm. And, the screenplay, okay, Joe, Nikki, Booker, Andy, they're pretty much taken care of. Nile, man, the difference between the first draft of the screenplay and the second draft of the screenplay, the second draft I referred to as the Nile rewrite. It was literally going back in there, and it was a realization. It was the note I got, which is Nile needs more. Nile has no story here. She does not affect the outcome of the story. And if you look at the first comic, right, look at Opening Fire, that's absolutely correct. Nile's presence on the team does not alter the outcome of the story at all. And that's bad writing. That's bad writing.
There you go.
Right?
Yep.
But I didn't see it because Nile's purpose in the comic was a different purpose. Yep. Nile's purpose in the comic was largely an expository one. Right? But the character story there, as a result, got short shrift. Sure. That had to be addressed. And boy, howdy, do I have that in mind as I'm writing the second series.
Interesting. Sure.
So,
interesting. Okay, yeah, makes sense. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, well, let's talk Lois, because I've been
it only took an hour and a half.
This is all great, man. Well, seriously, I'm thrilled that you are finding time hand in hand to work on the creative stuff. Well, let me ask real fast. This announcement that's coming at the end of the summer, and are you able to say, is it creator owned, or is it Yeah, it's a creator owned project that I'm doing. It's going to be a 5-issue series through Image. Okay.
But I don't want to say anything else about it because I don't want to float the balloon before we have the basket attached.
I understand. No, that's cool. So, that's fine. Again, as always, hopefully another excuse to talk sooner than later. So that's fine.
You figure if we plan on talking at the end of the summer, it means we'll talk around Christmas.
Spring.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God! Well, Lois, I mean, dude, I've been telling you and Gail Simone, I think ever since I started Word Balloon, because you were the two people that I thought would do it best in terms of, why isn't there a Lois Lane book? Good Christ, and I know talking to Brian, both on and off the record and stuff, and he's like, it's coming, and I'm like, all right, and thank God, man, no, they got the right man for the job, and
Though I got to tell you, and I suppose this says something right now, the Jimmy Olsen book is going to blow your mind.
I'm psyched, man. And what I saw in Leviathan Rising, I know Matt's going to have a blast with this thing, so that's great.
It is. And Lieber is just going to town. I mean, it is so good.
That's excellent. No, I want to talk to both of them. That's great.
It is so Matt doing what Matt does so well, and when the two vases, when the vase becomes the two faces, it's going to be such a great moment for people. He is so amazing to watch work. But yeah, Perkins and I have wanted to work together for a really long time.
And that's great too, because I love Mike as well. Mike's a great guy.
He's a machine. The guy's a workhorse.
He is. And seriously, he deserves a big book. I mean, he deserves great attention. I've felt this way ever since, God, at least Union Jack, if not further back, Yeah,
I feel bad that he got saddled with me. Look, it's interesting because we had some conversations very early on. We had wanted to do a thing that was actually proposed as a Blaack label that was going to be called The Planet, and was going to be sort of the spiritual inheritor to Gotham Central. Sure. Was the idea that you would follow a bunch of these reporters at The Planet and elsewhere, and again, ask the question, what is it like to try to be a custodian and an agent of the truth in a world where, there's a character who can actually use a lasso to make you tell it. And there are characters who can make you believe things that are not true. And it was a more, when we had talked about it then, it was sort of a more, it was a darker take. And then Brian, being Brian, waltzed by one day and said, Lois Lane book, you should do it. And it's been approved.
Well, does it have to be that different to be a DC Universe book and not a Black Label book? I mean, I meant,
yeah,
okay,
yeah, because when you were telling when you were doing a book called Lois Lane, and it is coming out when Brian Bendis is writing Action and Superman, and you are standing shoulder to shoulder on, with Bendis on one side and Matt Fraction on the other, then you are by necessity having to acknowledge the larger DCU in a way that a Black Label book wouldn't have had to.
Okay.
Black Label book would have been able to say, this is its own continuity. I can do whatever I want.
I see.
So even Gotham Central in its initial, played in the DC universe, but very rarely had to stray outside the bounds of Gotham.
Yep.
Right. And only really had to do so when it was editorially mandated.
Oh, really?
You can't really do that.
Because like a Keystone City sideline in Gotham, that was mandated?
That wasn't. Okay. But if you think about the one-off tie-in to like Final Crisis, that was. God, I don't even remember what that.
I don't even remember what that read like. That's fantastic. That's hilarious. But I see what you're saying now. Okay, literally into whatever event was going on, and obviously Lois is going to have to play in that world.
Right. So on one hand, this is Lois not doing the things that she's doing in Action and Superman. Right?
Sure.
Because that base is very well covered. You run into another problem too. I mean, there's a reason that the last Lois Lane book was called Superman's Girlfriend, Lois Lane, and that every plot was about Superman. Right? Yeah. Every story was about Superman. And this is, and I actually sat in a conference room in DC in December, and I had to sit down. Mike Cotton and Jessica Chen are the editors on the book, and they sort of were like, I was going to meet with them at the offices. And I got there, and Mike said, okay, so there's this meeting, and the bosses want to talk to you. And I was like, what the hell is this?
Sure.
And I go into this conference room, and it's sort of like a tribunal. And I've got Mike to my right and Jessica to my left. They know what I'm going to do. And I'm facing, a couple other folks, and they're like, so tell us about, okay, you're not going to get her kicking people. She doesn't have a sonic scream. She's not going to be using karate. Her name's Lois Lane. Right. She's the best investigative reporter in the DC universe. Yep. That's her superpower. Yep. Her superpower is that she's a reporter. And they looked at me and they said, okay. And I said, all right, you guys understand that's what you're going to get. And if you're looking for Lois to be getting into fistfights, fire me now. That's not going to be this book. I will give you an action quotient. I have a mechanism and a reason to do that. But Lois's action is a very different kind of action. Yep. And you're going to have to read it. And the other thing, and I tried to explain this to them, and I think they got it, but this was something that Mike Cotton and Perkins and I discussed very early on, is that there are a few things more boring in a comic book than turning the page and hitting some prose. Okay. It is literally like being punched in the gut. You are moving along in one medium, and then you turn the page, and you're getting literally punched out of the medium by another. So you weren't, one of the things I made very clear early on is you're never going to read what she's writing. You will never read it. You will hear about it. People will talk about it. You will see the effects of it. But you're never going to read Lois's pieces.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, people seem to get it because they're like, yeah, you're right. Because when you hit prose, it does kind of throw you off the stride. But it changes, again, the mechanism of what the book is about. Now, given everything what Brian is doing, in large part, I mean, at its heart, this book is a character study about Lois Lane. It's a book that says, what is it like to be Lois Lane? Right. And by that, we mean a number of things. What is it like to be married to Superman? What is it like to be a celebrity reporter in an era of, fake news and journalism and journalists not being trusted and the steady erosion of the Fourth Estate? What does it mean to be the mother of a son who has suddenly gone from 10 to 17 on you? No, because we honor. You got to. We have to be sincere about it. And then ultimately and what is it like to be? And it's interesting, that there's a bit at the start of issue 5 where Lois is actually, she's on a flight. She's flying from Chicago to DC. Okay. And she's, sitting there in her seat and she's, reading all of these financial transcripts because she's trying to get, to the bottom of this one story she's pursuing. And her seatmate recognizes her. And they have a very brief discussion about journalism. And about, this woman says, I read your blog post. I hadn't realized that, 102 journalists have been killed since, last year. But the woman that says, the line she says is there's a beat and she says, of course, some of them, they just say whatever they want. And Lois is like, that's not the way it works. I'm not reading this because I'm not doing this for fun, lady. Yeah. I'm doing this because this is my job. I've got to get the facts right. I've got to do my research. I've got to get it correct. And the woman asks, sort of the question that I think a lot of people are asking. She's like, well, she said, I don't mean you, but who makes sure those other people do it? And that's this moment we're in right now.
Yes.
This lack of belief in journalism as anything ethical, because we have burned away the line between what is journalism and what is punditry. Yep. We look at, I don't want to name names, that obviously, and the only reason I don't want to name names is because I think my bias is such that I can't approach it objectively and figure out who in the, on the left I would put in the same camp as, say, a Tucker Carlson or a Rush Limbaugh on the right.
I agree. No, you're right.
I'm sure there are.
Every time this comes up, I hate to say it, but then I turn into Trump on both sides, and it's like, in this case, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not sure because I go immediately to Rachel Maddow and I go, but she does journalism
most of the time.
I know that they research.
Yes,
I know that they're researching the fuck out of what she's going out with.
She's even dipped into sensationalism at moments, and luckily they've only been few moments, and I do like her most of the 99% of the time. But right. there was some document last year or 2 years ago that she thought was the biggest thing, and it was at Al Capone's vault, and it really was nothing. Yeah. It was really nothing, and it's like, come on, it's tough.
But again, if you're doing it 250 nights, out of 365.
No,
you're hitting it.
Oh, absolutely. Ratio. No, she's still. Yeah, you're right. No, she's Ted Williams. Well, she's still hitting 400. She's doing all right.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. So
you're right.
It's an interesting place, and
which is why it's interesting to have a Lois book at this time. You're right.
Yeah, and she's got I'll be interested to see how people respond to it, because people are going to think the book is one thing, and it really is.
Well, I'm hoping we get a bunch of surprises of various DC heroes, but even heroes that maybe don't like Lois. And I don't know if that's a universal that she's already part of the club because of who she is. I'd almost like to see a contrast and see the occasional someone that's like, something. You're lucky where you are, and maybe not get her. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you certainly get a fair amount of protection simply by being Lois Lane, and the community knowing who Lois Lane is. One of the things that, again, like I said, it's kind of a character study. She's got an interesting argument with Clark in 3.
Okay.
Where he has done something at the beginning of 3, and she kind of calls him out on it. And I think one of the other things that at least I find very compelling, and I know Mike responds to, is, this is Brian is doing a lot of the two-hander stuff with Lois and Superman, or Lois and Clark. This is Lois being married and having her own life.
Yeah, I hope so. Sure.
And not. She never uses Superman as a get out of jail free card.
Excellent. Great to hear. Nor should she.
That to me would be. She wouldn't. That's right. To me, not her character.
Well, that's not what attracts. That's not who he fell in love with. I mean, he fell in love with the woman that can take care of herself, and he wants. Well,
he also fell in love with, and this was something that Fraction said actually. Tuesday night, he and Brian and I got together and we were just talking, and I thought this was a beautiful insight. I really thought this was a beautiful insight. He said, "I'm probably going to get in trouble for sharing this. He's going to come after me and be like, why did you tell them that?" But I found this profoundly moving because I hadn't thought of it. See, because he and I had conversations. We've had conversations about the Jimmy Lois relationship,
okay,
and the depth of that friendship, because that friendship has to be extraordinary.
Yes,
but one of the things that Matt was saying was that, here's Superman and he shows up in Metropolis, and like the first two people he meets are people that he immediately understands because they're like him. They're both shielding themselves from the world. That Jimmy goes through the world with a camera in his face.
Interesting.
And so you don't see Jimmy's face. Jimmy is hiding behind the camera. You don't see Lois. Lois has, the notebook and the pencil.
Yep. Interesting.
It's always the notebook and the pencil. And I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really fascinating take, that one of the things that, Clark immediately responds to is, these are people like me. They can't ever truly be themselves. They are always hiding a part of themselves.
Interesting.
And so it's an interesting take.
No, that's good. That's very good.
I haven't unpacked all of it, but I was like, that is a hell of an insight.
Okay. I
am kind of inclined to get out of Toolbox and dig a little deeper on that. So yeah, I mean, she's also fun and she's funny. That's the other thing that I like about Lois is, and she is so, it's not that she's fearless. She just doesn't let her fear stop her.
Yep.
And I think she's angry a lot of the time. I think the way most journalists actually are angry, and then they eventually self-medicate it away. My friend, the writer Andrew Constant, who was a journalist for a while, talks about, when he was working at a paper and, they would all get off work and go down to the pub. And he said, and everybody would start getting shit-faced. He said, except for the crime reporters. The crime reporters would have started drinking at 10 in the morning.
Yeah.
Because he was like, they're just dealing with so much horrible all the time.
Yes. No, I understand, man. Yeah. Know my share of reporters, absolutely, man.
Yeah. So, Lois stokes that anger.
Yeah.
So, like I said, as the series goes on, I think people will start to realize what it's about. But one of the other things that I was committed to very early on is the temptation in these kinds of stories is to say, well, this is going on, and 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 they're all connected.
Sure.
And that's not Lois's life. Lois is pursuing at any given time 4 different stories. And sometimes they'll fold back and tie to each other, and sometimes, most of the time, they don't.
Good.
So that this investigation and this piece, which is going to go live, tomorrow, has nothing to do with the thing that I'm writing right now, which won't see the light of day for another 2 weeks. And then this other thing, which I have just uncovered, and now I have to decide whether or not I'm going to spike it. Because there's a question of, what truths cost and what truths actually need to be shown to who. We don't need to know everything. Our belief that we should know everything is arrogant. And the fact of the matter is, most of us can't handle everything. But what does that say? When Lois becomes the arbiter of what to tell and what not to tell. And these I find very compelling questions. But like I said, these are deep questions, and they don't have any punching. So I suspect the numbers are going to crater pretty quickly on this thing.
Well, how much in tone are you able to keep it? Will the problems involve? I'm trying to think. All right, I got to go to, and I'm blanking on Starman's city. Let's say it's Hawkman. Hawkman is in Baton Rouge or where?
Yeah.
Bell.
No, she's living in Chicago. She's got a suite at the Drake.
Yes, I know, which is awesome.
That's our continuity.
Okay, that's her headquarters.
That's been our source right now. She's been moving between Chicago and DC.
Okay.
I'm not like I said, this is. Aside from the fact that it'd be very difficult, for instance, to say I want to do a Lois Lane story where she uncovers, name the hero having done a thing, right? Then I have to worry about going to that writer. If I say I want to do a thing about Nightwing,
Sure.
And I have to worry about the Bat Office and so on. Why would I do that? Because all that's going to turn into is, a headache for everybody, and potentially me mucking with another writer's story.
Okay.
So on one level, I'm not that interested.
Okay. Yeah.
In that. But on the other side, she's Lois Lane. And she's got everybody's phone number.
Well, yeah. That's kind of more what I expected. Not so much, like when Brian did in Alias, Captain America having an affair and not realizing it was a married woman or whatever. I would think that was the part of the first arc. So I'm not thinking of that stuff, but actually more like you just said in terms of, something happened in Hub City. Well, I can, and we've already seen that the question is part of Leviathan, and the Leviathan story is its own animal. That's the other thing I should ask, I guess. Yeah. So there's Brian's event, and obviously you got to, write that chapter in the first Leviathan Rising thing. How much will the Lois Lane Monthly tie into Leviathan?
Remains to be seen.
Okay.
Initially, because again, I'm not going to get in Brian's way there, and he had a Lois plan for that. Okay. That was only going to complicate what was going on in this book. Leviathan does have a presence, but it actually has a presence sort of tangentially to a different story she's chasing, and enters in, I think, an unexpected way. But one of the things actually that I'm how to put this, the first 6 issues are kind of Lois working in an ever expanding bubble, and the back 6 issues, because we're approved for 12. Okay. Right now, they're calling it a maxi series. The back 6 issues are going to sort of, that bubble will have grown to include much more the larger DC.
Okay.
But like I said, it's a character study. It's not a plot book, in many ways. And so, there are certain things that you see, like we have repeated beats. We have Lois has coffee with Clark in the morning whenever they can. We have Lois works. Lois is listening to the media while she works. Lois has this orbit that she is in the way that, in a large way, it's influenced by what my life is as a writer.
Makes sense.
Because that's my experience.
Yeah.
This is what her day looks like. This is how she goes about doing her business. Because you get to see all the other sexy stuff in all the other books.
So are Cat Grant and Jack Ryder out there doing their thing, or other possible Roy Raymond? I'm trying to think of other TV or punditry that might be Gloria Scott-Fried, of course.
Well, we're going to be, like I said, we're expanding. Okay. But right now, she starts in this place where, and she starts in the place where Brian put her, which is she's in isolation. Mm-hmm. She's not at the planet. She is working on her own stuff. Yeah, apparently she's writing books. That's where we meet her. But, she's Lois, so she's not just doing the one thing.
Right.
And what the book is going to be its own sort of revelation as well. And then she's going to have to make a decision about it once she's got it finished.
Very interesting. Hey, no, and she deserves a character exploration. I mean, that's the thing. I think this is something that I think a lot of Lois fans have been waiting for, is let her, have center stage and be the star of her own story.
Look, I'm going to be, I'm sure anybody listening to this is going to be like, he sounds a little hesitant and a little like he's sort of shucking and jiving around. And I'm going to be perfectly honest. I don't know what the Lois Lane book is that people wanted. Mm-hmm. Or want. I don't know if this is it. I know this is the Lois Lane book I wanted to write.
That's cool.
Right?
I'm cool.
So, and well, except my commercial instincts are almost non-existent. So,
well, yeah, but Greg, I liked your Wolverine, for example. I mean, I really did.
Right, but yes, but Marvel didn't so much that they've actually removed my name from the cover in that True Believers edition. Mine and Derek's name are no longer on the cover, right? And that isn't a policy they did with all the books.
Damn.
Because I checked. So,
Yikes.
I was the guy who took Wolverine out of the top 5. You know what I mean? I'm proud of the story Derek and I told, but I have no illusions. It goes back to who likes burgers and who wants, anchovies on their Caesar salad, right? So
I get it, I guess, but again, you got in Tara's head. We got into Tara's head. We get into we get into Dex's head. And that's the kind of story I think we'll, again, Black Magick and everything else. I mean, these are the books that, this is what we come for, Lazarus. I mean, these are the things that we come for in a Rucka book, I think. So I do think that enough of your fans and I think Lois fans, well, it'll be interesting. I mean, who's to say? But you'll get 12 issues to explore and do the book you want to do, which is fine.
My understanding is that the first issue got leaked to Bleeding Cool, and that there's already been some brouhaha about it. And it's like, well, it's nice to know that people seem to think they know what the book's about, having read one issue.
Well, that's class.
You know what I mean?
I mean, every stupid book that comes out like that, I understand. Yeah. Jesus. Well, all I can tell you is I like what you and Mike did in Leviathan Rising. When does issue 1 come out?
July.
Oh, there you go. Just a couple weeks. Very nice.
Yep.
Outstanding. Yep. That's cool.
I believe it comes out on the 3rd, in fact.
Oh, there you go. Very patriotic. Excellent. Seriously, man, I always say this. I think, the reason why we all love the Daily Planet cast is because with the occasional Turtle Boy and Elastomeric exceptions, and a couple Lois stories back in the day and stuff. Even Perry I remember he had magic cigars that let him fly. That was one of the first Superman comics I ever had. But the thing is, they're great, and they're great because they're grounded, and they represent. Well, first of all, obviously being the investigative people that they are, they serve an important role, but also that every now and then you need to hear from the average person or the civilian point of view of the DC universe, and I think that's important, man. And I think that in the Marvel universe as well. It's good to hear.
Well, and I always like that view. I want to see the view from the ground when you have gods flying overhead.
Absolutely.
What is it like to have to report on them? And I will say one other thing. I absolutely love. I love the Perry Lois relationship.
I can appreciate that. Go on, please.
So that's something that we visit fairly consistently. I like that. I like their friendship and I like their mentorship.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I was talking to Jen about this, and she said, "Do we know where Lois trained? Like how she learned to become a journalist? Where did she get her ethics?" And that's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to it.
That's a good point, man.
I kind of want to dig into it because if there isn't a canon source, then the obvious source is a guy named Perry White.
Yeah, what did he see in her to hire her and everything? Yeah. No,
yeah,
that's true.
There was somebody who said you can't print that. That is not good journalism. That is unethical journalism. And to be at a point, for instance, where
that'd be a good story.
There's a bit in the first issue where Perry says, you verified this, you have the source on this, and she says, of course, absolutely. And he says, do I want to know where you got it from? And there's literally a couple no copy beats, and then he's like, all right, understood. There's a bit later on where they're talking and Wonder Woman comes up in conversation. He says, by the way, and Lois says, she's not the source. And her and Lois says she's not the source, and she would never let me. She would never let me. She would never be. She would never allow me to use her as an unnamed source.
Did you write it, or did Jimenez write that great conversation issue of Wonder Woman with her and Lois?
Oh, that was. I want to say it was Phil, but I actually think it was Phil and. I'm forgetting his name, much to my embarrassment. It was a co-written.
Okay. All right. Shame on us. All right.
It was in Phil's run.
Yeah. Okay.
It was in Phil's run, but I believe it was a co-written.
And they had that great Adam Hughes cover too. That kind of said a lot just with the image of them just sitting there and everything. And I like the moment in Leviathan Rising for that matter too. Yeah. So.
I've always thought they have I've always thought they've got a really unique, wonderful friendship as well. So
when you had to write around her killing Max Lord, I'll tell you, that was some of the best like subtext that you talked about at panels and stuff, and in our early conversations as well, in terms of Superman not forgiving her and Lois, kind of going to Superman, going, "You idiot! She did that for you." And it's like, what are you doing? My God. And it's, again, this is the strength of a civilian being able to talk to one of the gods. And that's why, like I always say, like, thank God for Marvel with Matt and Foggy. Foggy has that relationship with Matt where he can get in Matt's face and say, "You're fucking up. What are you doing?" It's like, and you need someone that can do that. And I know, and Lois can do that with Clark, obviously. And it's, no, that's terrific. As far as Perry goes, man, I always think it would be great in the right hands to get a flashback of Perry White as crusading reporter, and put him in that, I don't know, post-Justice Society kind of, maybe the 50s, dealing with Captain Comet or some of the other, you know what I mean? The earlier generation of heroes and stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it'd be great to see all that shit. And like I said, Roy Raymond. I mean, in my DC fan fiction, I do have a story where it's Alan Scott and Roy Raymond and crusading reporter Perry White and Wildcat.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah, and it's funny because we're in this place where we talk about the legacies of these characters and their growth and so on, and it behooves us to remember that in DC continuity, the generation that we follow is not the first generation.
Yep.
And there are some interesting questions to be asked about who and what came before.
Absolutely, man.
And what did they leave, and what did they get?
Yep. Well, that's why James Robinson was able to tell that wonderful Golden Age story that he did post World War II with all the heroes and everything. No, it's fertile ground. Absolutely, man. Well, I'm excited for what's ahead. Has there been a stone we haven't unturned?
I'm sure there's stuff that somebody will say, "Why didn't you ask him about this?" But I can't remember.
All right, fair enough.
I feel like we've covered.
I think we did too, and I appreciate the time because, like, I know I'm keeping you from work, so I do thank you for.
Yeah, I got to get back to it, but that's okay,
dude. As always, no, it's always great to talk to you, both on the record and off the record, and I appreciate your friendship, and I miss you, and like I said, I'm going to do everything I can to maybe. Make a pilgrimage out to the West Coast and try and see you either for a Rose City or another excuse to go to Portland and see everybody, and certainly you and Jen, and at least Dash, So
if not Elliot,
exactly, he might be in school, but no, that's great, man. I'm thrilled. I mean, really, man, this is an exciting time for you, and it sounds like you got the right perspective on it and everything, and I'm glad because I hope that more people get excited and aware of what you're doing. It's a great time for you. It's a great time for Brubaker and Matt and Brian and everything. And I'm thrilled for all four of you, in particular.
Yeah, things are going well right now. Let's hope it continues.
Absolutely, man. Well, let's try and meet in the fall. And
okay.
and by then we'll have a few Lois Lane issues out, and we can look at what's happening with Stumptown, and we'll find out when the Old Guard is getting closer to a release on Netflix.
Yeah, I expect it'll probably be next year, but God only knows. Always great talking to you, John.
Greg Rucka, Catch up on all of his work, whether it's Black Magick with him and Nicholas Scott, and Lazarus with him and Mike Lark, The Old Guard, Leandro Fernandez and Greg, Stumptown, he and Matthew Southworth and Justin Greenwood, and of course the upcoming Lois Lane book featuring Mike Perkins and Greg. That starts in just a couple of weeks in July. Can't wait to see it. Always happy to talk to Greg, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Word Balloon, brought to you again by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Subscribe to Word Balloon via Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon, or click on the Patreon ad at the front page of wordballoon.com. This episode of Word Balloon also brought to you by Aftershock Comics. Amazing books, great genres, some of the top creators out there. Dark Arc from Cullen Bunn and Juan Doe. I know that's coming back in the fall, and I can't wait. Baby Teeth with Donny Cates. Animosity with Marguerite Bennett. Also great books like Oberon from Ryan Parrott and Dark Red from Tim Seeley. Out of the Blue from Garth Ennis. Also, just getting started last month, we got Descendant by Stephanie Phillips and Killer Groove from Ollie Masters and Owen Marin. Really great books, all your favorite genres, some incredible work from great writers and artists. And you'll hear about them right here on Word Balloon, because every month we talk to a couple more Aftershock creators about their books, and we'll be doing more in the weeks ahead. But you don't have to wait. If you want more information, go find full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on these books to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. Thanks again, League of Word Balloon listeners. Looking forward to this month, June. Lots of great conversations, and I am looking forward to bringing them to you in the days and weeks ahead. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2019.